Well, hi everyone. Welcome to the Hard Answers. I'm Tom Graham. What is your political ideology? What is the most important political thing to you? Is it the type of government that's most important? Do you want a king, a president, or maybe a benevolent fascist dictator? How important is justice? Should we just kill everyone who breaks the law? Is an eye for an eye a good idea? Should we really assume the accused to be innocent until proven guilty, even in rape cases? What is justice? Is the greater good always the best thing? If a healthy young man goes into a hospital, can a doctor just kill him and harvest his organs to save 100 people because the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few? Is equality important to you? What kind of equality? Equality under the law, equality of outcome, equality of standard of living. What are the consequences of equality? If 1,000 spectators go to a basketball game with $20 each, they will choose to spend that money very differently, if they spend it at all. And by the end of the night, everyone will be unequal. Equality plus liberty, or the freedom to choose, equals inequality. How much of your liberty are you willing to give up to achieve equality? What about your natural rights to privacy, travel, association, your freedom to speak for or against the government and institutions, to follow the religion of your choice or not to? When choosing an economic system, are you willing to accept the future outcomes of a merit-based economy as long as the standard of living for everyone continues to rise, even if that meant huge wage disparities, wealth disparities? Should the free market govern itself? Political ideologies are typically formed passively and informally, not actively. There is compelling evidence that your political ideology is partially genetic. Organisms, including human beings, seem to adjust their sexual reproductive strategies based on resource abundance or scarcity. Over millennia, humans have gone through periods of scarcity and abundance and may have developed certain biological tendencies that are triggered when they perceive scarcity or abundance. Perceiving abundance creates anti-competitive and open-minded behavior. Perceiving scarcity creates competitive and loyal behavior. Political socialization is a lifelong process by which people form their ideas about politics and acquire political views. The family, church, educational system, peer groups, and the mass media all play a role in forming your political ideology without you even knowing it. When you break away from your parents, sometimes you choose opposite political opinions just to be contrary at the time. But sometimes those ideologies stick. This video is about how you can actively and reasonably form your own political ideology. Before you can form a political ideology, you need to understand what one is. A political ideology is a coherent set of views on politics and the role of the government. Consistency over a wide range of issues is the hallmark of a political ideology. Before we continue, we need to know that what the word politics means. Black's Law Dictionary defines it as the science of government, the art or practice of administering public affairs. So what does government mean? Black's Law Dictionary defines it as the regulation, restraint, supervision, or control which is exercised upon the individual members of an organized jural society by those invested with the supreme political authority for the good and welfare of the body politic. So in forming your political ideology, you must decide: 1. What constitutes the good and welfare of the body politic? 2. What parts of your life do you have supreme control over, and what parts does the government get to regulate, restrain, supervise, or control with supreme authority? 3. What is the proper role of regulation, restraint, supervision, or control which is exercised upon the individual members of an organized jural society by those invested with supreme political authority for the good and welfare of the body politic. Again, what is their proper role? 4. How do you achieve it? Let's take a look at that last question first. How exactly does the government assume supreme political authority to regulate, restrain, supervise, or control individuals? The bottom line is either through force or by voluntarily choosing to submit to their authority. In a state of nature, we are all born with the right to survive through absolutely any means necessary. This means that we all have the right to steal from, to kill, to rape, and to enslave anyone we wanted if we thought that that would enable us or our genes to survive. And we did steal, kill, rape, and enslave all throughout history. A state of nature is an ugly, brutish place. Ancient and not so ancient wars resulted in stealing, killing, raping, and enslaving throughout history. It started out as families killing other families for hunting grounds and mates, then tribes of kin fighting with other tribes, eventually kingdoms, each time building larger and more powerful militaries to conquer more and to rule the conquered. Of course, the conquerors made rules for the conquered and enslaved them. Many of the male slaves, especially in Persian countries, were castrated. Non-royal, non-military members of the new societies were tasked to survive and pay taxes to support the militaries and the royals. But this conquering modality created governments of fear and force, totalitarian fascism. Even though there were several benevolent dictators, this type of government forcefully takes your individual rights, forces you to work for and pay taxes to the government, and decides how much of what you get to keep. At the same time kings were taking authority through force, a magnificent thing happened. Around 3000 BC, traders who traditionally caravaned between tribes and between cities and between kingdoms set up static marketplaces for their customers to come to them. The owners of the marketplaces made rules of exchange and paid enforcers to enforce them. Kings weren't the only ones who could make rules. If you stole from a vendor in the marketplace enforced justice by chopping off your hand. If a vendor tried to cheat a customer with a bad scale, they too were punished. But still, people voluntarily came to these marketplaces and voluntarily followed the rules so they could engage in commerce. They temporarily lent the authorities of the marketplace supreme political authority over their very lives for the chance to participate in trade. The owners of the marketplace required the vendors operating in it to pay a percentage of their sales to the marketplace in exchange for providing security, enforcement of contracts, and settlement of disputes. This is a voluntary government because the government derives its power from the people being governed, voluntarily lending their rights to the government of the marketplace in exchange for a marketplace where rules were known and enforced equally, safety and justice. By the year 1215, the royal barons in England were already taking steps to limit the authority of the authoritarian government, then King John, and recognize the rights of the governed to justice. First drafted by Archbishop of Canterbury to make peace between the unpopular king and a group of rebel barons, the Magna Carta promised the protection of church rights, protection for the barons from illegal imprisonment, access to swift justice, and limitations on feudal payments to the crown, to be implemented through a council of 25 barons. Neither side stood behind their commitments, and the charter was annulled by Pope Innocent III, leading to the First Barons' War. But it was the start of the reining in of big government's reign. See what I did there? Several attempts tried to make the Magna Carta stick, and 82 years later, in 1297, it was confirmed as part of England's statute law. The United States, up until the Revolutionary War in 1776, were simply British colonies, governed by the King of Britain, then King George III. Once the original 13 colonies broke away from Great Britain's rule, they had a choice to make: create another kingdom or create a constitutional republic where all people participate in the political process and are equal under the law. It took until the 1970s, over 100 years after slavery had been abolished after the Civil War, to achieve that equality under law. But considering the country has only existed 240 years, the last 50 years of literally everyone, regardless of sex, skin color, national origin, debt, or disability, everyone having equality under the law in the U.S. is truly a magnificent historic achievement. So when you're forming a political ideology, as to the question of how do I achieve it, you must ask yourself, do I want a forced or voluntary government? The next question to consider when forming a political ideology is, what are you, the individual, comfortable giving supreme control over to a group of other people who you don't even know and will probably never meet for the good and welfare of the body politic? After you determine what you would have them control, how would you go about limiting them to those specific items and not other things? Because a government is necessarily funded by the people through taxation, it is a creation of the collective and tends to favor the collective over the individual. It tends to favor the greater good over the individual's liberty. So having a government at all is a threat to all your other individual liberties that you did not loan to the government. This is where we get the phrase, the price of liberty is eternal vigilance. The vigilance of the individuals watching which individual liberties the collective government tries to take away. And it has tried in the past and will try in the future to take more of your rights. How will you control the natural tendency of the government to usurp your liberty and eventually create a nation of slaves to it? With this realization, then you have to decide what is so valuable that you are willing to gamble with your very freedom to have the government protect it for you. How important is individual liberty to you? The only way a representative government can exist is for you to lend some of your liberty to it and then submit to its supreme authority. Should you trust the government with your religious beliefs, your ability to defend yourself, your privacy, your property, your testimony, your ability to procreate? The final question to answer is probably the most disputed question to answer. What constitutes the good and welfare of the body politic? One large thing can be learned from the kingdom model. Every body politic needs a strong military to protect its borders from attack or encroachment, and to be ready to fight back if attacked. Of course, this is only true if you believe in national borders. This is because most body politics want to feel safe from foreign attack because they feel that their national values are worth protecting from attack. It's not just the land that's being attacked, it's your institutions, your values, and your way of life. But you also need to learn from the marketplace model. Through establishing a justice system that protects everyone equally, a government can provide justice. Now, it's easy to say that we need police to enforce laws, legislatures to create laws, and judges to interpret and apply the law. But do we want to let the legislators legislate everything? Everything we allow the government supreme power over is one more thing we no longer have the liberty to control ourselves. And liberty is vital for the good and welfare of the body politic. Government-provided safety and justice is contrary to liberty, and therefore contrary to freedom. So some sort of balance is going to need to be struck between safety, justice, and liberty in order to achieve the good and welfare of the body politic. Should we make sure that we have a healthy and robust discussion between the differing ideologies to keep us moving forward, but also to keep us from running off a cliff? Is our left-right dichotomy a hindrance, or is it the key to our success? Should we encourage the free flow of ideas, or should the government make certain thoughts and ideas and speech illegal? How much food, shelter, clothing, education, healthcare, communication, and travel is included in what constitutes the welfare of the body politic? How do you pay for it all? It's important at this time to point out similarities between religions and political ideologies. It used to be religious institutions cared for the sick and infirmed, cared for the poor and elderly, and educated the children. Now, our society has institutionalized these religious values through government-provided non-secular social programs that you are forced to pay for with your taxes. So doesn't this mean that our society is religious at heart, if not in faith-based values? As a result, churches and religions play a far smaller part in the U.S. society today, and as a result, many people have just thrown religion by the wayside. But people are complex creatures and seem to have a tendency throughout history to be religious. Starting out with worshiping mountains, the sky, and animals, religions throughout history have evolved into more and more complex institutions. Groups began to congregate based on religious belief instead of kinship. Nature worship evolved into idol worshiping. Idol worshiping evolved into hierarchies of gods in Egypt, Greece, Rome, and others. Polytheism evolved into monotheism, and along the way, religions kept asking the question, how would God want me to treat others? Eventually, the most sophisticated religions simply answered with the golden rule: do unto others as you would have done unto you. Religions instilled a belief that God was always watching and that you would be judged for your actions on earth, so most who believe in God behave to their best ability even when no one else is around. The modern generations have actively made sophisticated religions less important in their lives, but that has created a gap in their psychology, which seems to have been filled with more primordial religious tendencies. So be on the lookout for cult-like activities when forming your political ideology. We must also understand tribalism is incredibly important to us as humans. While watching elections, a soccer game, football game, or any other competitive event, our minds and our bodies change. Thanks to mirror neurons in our brains, we actually feel as if we're playing the game with them. This can cause your heart rate, blood pressure, cause localized vasoconstriction, narrowing of blood vessels, and sometimes arrhythmias, or abnormal heart rhythm. You can literally have a heart attack watching a great game or a heated political debate. This ability to feel as other members of your group feel makes the bonds between the members of your in-group even stronger. So once you've established your political ideology, it is going to be incredibly difficult to switch from one tribe to another. Now is the time to take a step back, to try to admit that you don't actually know why you've adopted your political ideology, and just until you figure it out, try to step away from those things that would stop you from investigating other ideologies in an open-minded way. Unfortunately for college-age students today, colleges, which used to be the place where you could really investigate all the different political ideologies and differing thoughts so you could truly actively form your own political ideology, have now become tribalistic and religious in their overall political belief systems. On certain campuses, if a conservative is invited to speak, instead of protesting the ideas of the speaker, the protesters will try to shut the event down, eject the speaker from their campus, and the college administration seems to be complacent at best, complicit at worst. This seems to have been brought on fairly recently. Universities have gone from 40% conservative professors and 60% liberal professors in the 1990s to the current 2018 ratio, where liberal professors outnumber conservative professors 17-1. To a growing number of students, the virtues of inclusiveness and tolerance and welfare programs and affirmative action have become sacrosanct. They believe that opposing opinions spoken on campus somehow violate the sanctity of the campus. Such heresy will make the campus unclean. The campus has become the new church, and the virtues of inclusiveness and tolerance have morphed into idolic worship, expressed through the vices of intolerance and exclusion of differing opinions. Much the same way the climate change, once thought of as a scientific theory, up for the constant scrutiny of peer review, is now held to the level of a religion, where people who disagree with how NASA and the NOAA modify the raw data collected to fit the climate change model are told to be silent by the disciples of climate change because the science is settled, and those who disagree with the model's predictions due to the fact that none of the dire predictions have come true in the last 100 years are called deniers. which in reality is as bad as a religion calling you a heretic and excommunicating you. Because of this atrocious attitude and behavior towards differing opinions in the university, on social media, in certain leftist corporations, and even in our own government, people with differing opinions, in order to avoid being branded xenophobic, homophobic, racist, sexist, transphobic, the list goes on, keep their opinion to themselves. And when Donald Trump gets elected, these disciples of leftism feel like the train just flew off the tracks and went down a cliff and exploded because there was no indication that they weren't correct. It was devastating for them. What if we as a country all accepted one political ideology? When the world showed us the error of that ideology, the entire country would go off the cliff, down, and explode. This type of tribalistic religious fanaticism towards political ideology and political special interest is truly harmful to our country. Whatever you decide your political ideology should be, you need to be open to peer review, discussion, and civil discourse, and never, ever try to censor those with differing opinions. So please be aware that there are people and institutions out there that literally turn their political ideologies into unsophisticated primordial religions. Now that you're on your way to forming your own political ideology, let's take a look at the most popular American political ideologies. But first, political ideologies are not political parties. It's true that political party members tend to favor a single political ideology, but there is typically a wide mixture of ideologies within a single party, creating factions within that party, like the Tea Party Republicans and the Democratic Socialists. Right now, we're not going to talk about parties. We're talking about ideologies. The popular ideologies today include libertarianism, socialist, anarchist, nihilist, but the two most popular today are neo-progressive liberal and conservative. Conservatives tend to believe that government, because it is necessarily a collectivist creation, has a tendency to want to expand itself by usurping individual liberty. Conservatives tend to want smaller government and let free market competition take care of bad actors in business. Conservatives are statistically more loyal, less open-minded, and more orderly. Conservatives are great at running businesses, but absolutely terrible at starting them. Conversely, liberals tend to believe that bigger governments can solve bigger problems and don't trust corporations to behave in the individual or the community best interest, so they favor more regulation on the free market. Liberals are statistically less loyal, more open-minded, and less orderly. Liberals are great at starting businesses, but terrible at running them. This loyalty versus open-mindedness plays itself out in divorce statistics as well. Liberals get divorced 30% more than conservatives, but it also plays itself out in science and human progress. The left running forward with new ideas, but the right stopping them before they run off a cliff. This is a practical example of yin and yang. Once again, if your entire community had one ideology, they would either run off that cliff or simply never move. The two ideologies over the long term work extremely well together. Yes, there are hiccups here and there, no doubt, but historically they get the job done. Nihilists reject non-rationalized or non-proven assertions, politically rejecting the necessity of most fundamental social and political structures, such as government, family, or even law and law enforcement. Anarchism is a political philosophy that advocates self-governed societies based on voluntary institutions. These are often described as stateless societies, although several authors have defined them more specifically as institutions based on non-hierarchical or free associations. Anarchism holds the state to be undesirable, unnecessary, and harmful. The big problem with both nihilism and anarchism is that any society based on these principles would not have a strong military to protect itself and its values, and any military intervention by a foreign attacker with a collective, taxpayer-funded military would destroy them in seconds. It's fun to fantasize about, but in practicality, it's not sustainable. Socialism is a social system characterized by social ownership and democratic control of the means of production, as well as the political theories and movements associated with them. Social ownership may refer to forms of public, collective, or cooperative ownership, or to citizen ownership of equity. There are many varieties of socialism, and there is no single definition encapsulating all of them, though social ownership is a common element shared by its various forms. But another clear thread binds all versions of socialism, and that is they attempt to strip away individuality by creating a society that believes any talent you are born with should not benefit you any more than it benefits society, and socialism creates regulation to force people to work according to their ability and to be compensated according to their need. The problem, of course, with socialism is that it goes out of its way to ensure merit is not rewarded. This is a big problem because we as human beings need to be rewarded and recognized for our individual contributions. If we are not appreciated for our efforts, we will do the minimum amount of work necessary to survive. Socialism, for the foreseeable future, will always stagnate and fail. If we ever get to a point where we have unlimited energy and Star Trek-like matter replicators, so everyone could have anything they ever wanted at any time they wanted, then maybe socialism could work. But we have to deal with the fact that we are resource constrained, and socialism is ill-equipped for that reality. Many non-free societies employ capitalism. So capitalism does not create a free society, but all free societies employ capitalism. Libertarianism is a collection of political philosophies and movements that uphold liberty as a core principle. Libertarians seek to maximize political freedom and autonomy, emphasizing freedom of choice, voluntary association, individual judgment, and self-ownership. Libertarians are fiscally conservative and socially for liberty. This makes them uniquely suited to create compromises between conservatives and liberals. Over the next few weeks, I'll be discussing these topics a little bit more in depth. What constitutes the good and welfare of the body politic? What parts of your life do you have supreme control over, and what parts does the government get to regulate, restrain, supervise, or control with supreme authority? What is the proper role of government? How do you achieve it? By the end of the videos, you'll be able to actively form your own political ideology based on facts, reasons, and the hard answers. I'll also try to refer you to enough online resources that you could spend literally weeks researching. Or, if you're an apathetic moderate who really doesn't participate in the political process, much like Rastafarians and Old Order Amish, maybe just a couple hours. Please click the subscribe button to see more videos like this. If you disagree with me, please leave a comment. My ears are always open, and I learn new things every day when people disagree with me. I'm Tom Graham. I'll see you next time on The Hard Answers.